All right, hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache. Last week we had Debbie and Dennis on with us, and they were sharing their story, and we asked them so many questions. We didn't get to the main part of what we actually wanted to talk about, so we decided to break it up into two separate episodes. But thanks everyone for coming on and listening. Dan, I know I just saw you 5 minutes ago, but for those that are listening, good to see you again, my brother.
Likewise. You all look the same. None of us
Yeah,
have done
it's
laundry.
changed. Yeah. So, but because this is such an important episode, just like the last episode, and you guys are so full of wisdom, you have so much experience, and you've given so many people hope. We want to throw it right to you. So first off, I think I'm gonna throw it to Debbie. I hear you're writing a book, and I'd love to hear some about what you're working on and how you're going to be able to help even more people out now.
Okay. Well, it's a book I probably have been needing to write for 30 some years, but it's like, okay, I'm dealing with procrastination. And the more we work with bereaved parents or people in grief, period, we realize it's such a timely and time for a book such as this. And the working title is Lies Grief Tells You. And so far I have 10 lies, and we kind of talked about the first one in the last episode, but the very first lie is I will always regret. So I coulda, I woulda, I shoulda, I wish, if only, those kind of things of regret. And the second one is it's my fault. My child died or my loved one died. And while we think about that, it's like I didn't do enough. My sin is the reason my child died. I'm a bad person. And what kind of a parent lets their child die? Oh, that's a bad one. And my faith was not strong enough, or I'm not enough. And the third lie is I will never survive this. And basically the subtitle for that one is, will it always hurt this bad? And the fourth lie is no one understands. I am all alone. And I think everyone who grieves just kind of feels isolated, and they feel like they are the only one going through this grief and that no one can possibly understand. But as the reason for your podcast is to help fathers see that you're not alone, and there are other men, there are other fathers who understand the pain that you're going through. And then number 5 is God has abandoned me. Why, God, why? You know, there's questions that we all ask, and why didn't you stop my child from dying? Why did you let this happen? And if you love me so much, why did you even let me be a part of this? Those kind of things that we just assume that God has abandoned us. And the number 6 is I should be over it by now. And it's learning that grief is messy, and it's just as individual as your own personality. And while Kubler-Ross talks about the 5 stages of grief, what I'm digging up in this lie is that grief doesn't have to be chronological in those 5 stages. It could be all messed up, and you're going to grieve the way you grieve because you are different from me, whether you're a man or a woman. Or it doesn't matter. Just because you have a different personality than me, you're going to grieve totally different. So grieve the way that your personality allows, and just go with it. And go into a bit more detail about that.
I'm going to have a pause a minute because I want to say something about that too. Is as a husband and as a wife, we grieve differently, and one of the most helpless situations I think you can feel as a spouse is, she could not take my pain away. No matter what she did, there was no way she could take my pain away. There's no way I could take her pain away. And we had to be able to give each other the grace that Debbie probably at some points felt like he sure is taking a long, long time, but you have to give the other one the grace to grieve the way they grieve. No one grieves the same. And if you're not careful as a husband and wife, if you put unrealistic expectations upon each other, it will definitely have a detriment to your marriage relationship, because you'll be thinking, well, why is he not doing better than this? Or why is she not further along than this? You have to allow each one to take it as they're taking it, and recognize their setbacks. Sometimes you might be moving forward, and the other one thinks, boy, he's moving along really well right now, or she's moving along really well right now, and all of a sudden something will just knock you flat, and you'll think, oh no. So just be aware that everybody grieves differently, and don't expect the other one. Don't ever say to your spouse, you should be over this by now, because guess what? You're not going to be over this. You're going to learn to live with it, but you're not going to be over it, if that makes sense.
I think, yeah, I think that's one of the most common things that comes up on the grief groups that I'm in, at least. I think Chris is in most of the same ones, that my marriage is failing after it. What do we do? And yeah, I think what you just said is so important. I know I've shared it before, and I think it for my marriage with Erica, it worked. It was either day 1 or day 2. I don't know that we even had been home from the hospital for an hour, and we looked at each other and said, divorce is not an option.
Yep,
And
yep.
we set that standard immediately. And as we were going through the time of grieving, the biggest thing that I needed from Erica was to know that whatever emotional response she was having at that moment wasn't because of something I had done. I understand you're grieving Jameson and you're having all kinds of triggers and memories and flashbacks and all that. Did I say something, do something to help to hurt you or upset you? And as long as she told me, no, it's the grief, then I was able to step back, realize, okay, our marriage is fine. She had her space, she gave me my space, and we've really worked well together. I mean, I could say that. I hope she would say the same thing. We've really worked well together as a team, picking up the slack of raising Reese, cleaning the house, everything. Because we don't place expectations and our feelings and our desires on each other. I think that's enormous.
And I think what you said about looking at each other and saying divorce is not an option, that's extremely healthy, because as we've worked over the years with other bereaved parents, and some of them choose to divorce, and to me that just makes life even sadder, because Debbie and I are the only two. We came together, and Ryan was a result of us coming together. We're the only ones that know Ryan and live with Ryan and have that common bond. So when a couple chooses to throw in on their marriage and say, well, I'm just going to go my separate way, then you've got that battle of another person won't know what it was like to have your child. Another person won't know what the struggles you've had. So yeah, if you can look at your life, and no matter how rough the marriage gets or how challenging it gets, if you can say divorce is not going to be an option for us, with the passing of time and the pulling together and drawing into one another and drawing strength from one another, you'll be able to say, yep, I'm glad we stayed with it. And I would say, here we are, almost 49 years of marriage, and Ryan was only 6 years of that. So, I mean, when you think, we're so glad we stayed together. So the divorce is not an option can be a very healthy, a very wise decision when a couple decides that in the throes of grief.
Right.
So,
and we've lost our child. We've lost enough. We don't need to lose our marriage as well. Fight for that. And it is not easy, and sometimes it's just downright hard. But goodness, we've suffered enough loss already. Don't compound it by letting your marriage fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Good point. Okay, you had some more, Debbie?
All right, Debbie.
Okay, and lie number 7 is I need a change, and we share about our experience of not following that rule and the pain that we went through, and particularly with our son. And one thing that has been proven is that when you go through the death of a child or death of someone close to you, is that scale that they have, what is it called? Holmes-Rahe Life Stress Inventory. The death of a child, the death of a loved one is the highest stress point ever. And so when you're under so much stress, the last thing you really have the mental and emotional capability, and even the physical capability of doing is making a major change. So it's really important to understand that you need at least, if all possible, 6 months, but a year is even better before making a major change. And I give tips on how to, if it has to be done, how to follow through on that. And then I'm working on this one, and I really would like input and maybe feedback from your listeners later on. But the lie that I cannot forgive, and this has been the most difficult chapter for me to write, because it's a lot like grief, in that while grief is a process, so is forgiveness, right? Like, I will never forgive the doctor who misdiagnosed and prescribed the wrong medication for my loved one. The drug dealer who sold the drugs, the person who murdered my child, the drunk driver, the gun shop owner, the friend who wasn't available. I can't forgive myself for, because that goes back to number one, the regret. And so this one is really a hard one. And why is it a lie? It's a lie because we realize that we must forgive, because forgiveness is something that we do for the person who wronged us. It's something we do for us. If we want to heal, if we want to get over, we're never going to get over grief, but if we want to heal from our loss, we will eventually get to the point where we know that we need to forgive. But this has been the hardest one to write so far. And so I'll come back to this one. But number 9 is children are more resilient in their grief. And I even asked our son, would you please share your story? Because he has never talked about his grief. And we're talking 37 years ago. And he's in his 40s now. And he said, well, I'm going to have to think on that one, Mom, because it's still really deep for him. And the last one is, what good could possibly come from this? So any input from your listeners, that lies that you believe in your early stages of grief. And so Dennis and I on this side of grief are not in the early stages, but we believed every one of these lies. And I can still remember on the forgiveness that we had gone through a marriage course, probably year 15 in our marriage.
Probably.
And he was had an assignment in San Antonio. We were going through a marriage course, and the lesson was on forgiveness. And part of it was to get together as a couple and pray about things that you need to forgive. And so we were together, and immediately both of us, it's almost like we unanimously said it at the same time, began to list all these people that we had unforgiveness about regarding our son, Ryan. So it was like so amazing that all those years later, we had unforgiveness about people who, or maybe doctors, bosses, neighbors, and they were just coming out of our mouths just that quick. So we realized forgiveness is very, very important in the healing process of grief. So any input from you guys? I would love to hear what some of the lies that you believed.
Every single one of them, yeah.
Every single one of them.
Okay.
That's the way it feels now. I mean, being just 2 years in, I think a lot of those really hit close to home and heart. And, I think I'm going to reflect on some of them and send you some info, Debbie, just from mine and Amanda on what we've been going through for sure.
Good.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm not struggling with the forgiveness because Jameson's death was so quick. And as we learned what took him, I don't think there was anything that anybody could have done, and there was no way that we realistically could have known. But I know so many people do struggle with that. And listening to you talk, Debbie, it seems like it would be so powerful and healing to make that list. Do a Post-it note for every person that you're struggling to forgive. I don't have any experience, so I'm speaking ignorantly here. But yeah, that just struck me as something that would be very helpful to do.
I would just say that I think it it is a thing that we struggle in our family with right now. Mason, we were not happy with the treatment of Mason and the diagnosis of one pediatrician compared to neurologist. and it's led to some great heartache in our family, to be honest, of um, that forgiveness. And I think I've come to the point where I am at that point where I don't know if I forgive them, but I understand their logic. But my wife is not there, and I don't know when she'll be there. But she's very, very angry at both doctors, to be honest. And we have talked about it often, and for sure about it. That's probably one of the hardest discussions we actually have, is placing that blame on those doctors and their decision making. And I just always think, like, they're humans and they did the best they could with the info they had, but
this is my son you mess with.
Yeah.
You practice medicine on. Yeah.
And I think too, though, it's very important that, and everybody will move into that with the passing of time and all of that, is eventually I find that if I allow unforgiveness to continue to be in my life, it actually is like some people talk about unforgiveness being that you are the one actually drinking the poison, and you're hoping the other person will die. But guess what? That's the other person doesn't die that you're choosing to not forgive. You're the one that's literally beginning to die, whether it's not die literally, but die in your spirit and die about life. So, but I think particularly with bereaved parents or anybody being bereaved, everybody's going to move at their own space, and you don't tell Amanda, well, you need to be over this. No, when she's able to process it, and when each one of us recognizes, well, if I keep carrying this unforgiveness, it just gets heavier and heavier. Eventually, we might be able to say, you know what, I'm going to release this. Yes, I'm very sad about what happened. It should have been handled differently, but at some point, you'll just realize I'm not going to let this continue to rob me of life and destroy me. So, but until you get there, I mean, when we sat down and go into that course, I mean, it was just like people, like they just
at the same time.
And I mean, because some people don't mean to hurt us when we're grieving. Now, some people, they're just downright rude. Okay, don't excuse rude, callous behavior, because some people operate that way, and it's inappropriate. But some people innocently might have said something or failed to come through, or said, I'm going to pick up your son and do something special with him, and didn't come through. Those kind of things, you begin to recognize, I can't let them destroy me. But forgiveness is a process, and I just encourage people, you forgive as you're able to forgive. And I find in forgiveness sometimes what happens too is, if I go before God and say, I'm forgiving this, there's other times when somehow it'll come back to your memory, and you'll think, and I just choose to say, I distinctly remember forgiving that. Okay. So when you want to get hounded in your mind, because you got enough going on with your mind trying to really attack you in every way it can. So I'll just say, well, I distinctly remember forgiving that. I'm not going to give it any more energy, any more time. But forgiveness is a process, and everybody forgives at their own speed or their own pace. And so, and again, when you get so uncomfortable with being unwilling to forgive, and you start being bitter in life, you'll probably begin to say, this is not paying off the way I want it to pay off. So, but everybody moves at their own stage, if that makes sense.
Definitely does, yeah. Debbie, book sounds amazing. I know you're still working on it. You got a goal of when you want it to be done by, so I can get the first copy.
I know. Well, yeah, Chris and I are going to fight for the first copy.
Yeah.
She'd love to have it done, I think, by the end of the year.
But then I just want to write it and give it to somebody, let them take care of this publishing and publicity and all that stuff. But I don't know. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think too, for Debbie, I think Debbie has known for many, many years this was a book that she was supposed to write.
Yes.
But I think the pain that has come out of writing this book, and the bringing up of everything with Ryan has been so painful that one way to avoid pain is not to go there. Okay. And that's unfortunate. That's what happens with a lot of people. They stuff their grief, and the reality is, you're going to either deal with your grief as it's occurring, or you're going to stuff it, and later in life, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you big time. So I encourage people, deal with grief as it's occurring as the best you can. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know, I mean, all 10 of those lies are fantastic, and you can probably write 25 books with each one with 10 different lies.
And there's probably many more lies than that.
Yes.
That's just the 10 that kind of stood out for Debbie. Yeah.
But
I don't think there's going to be one more, but I'm such a perfectionist. That's one of the reasons I've written too. Is I don't think I want an uneven number.
Yeah.
So I can't have 11. I got to have 12.
No.
But with the last part of the book is going to be the very last chapter will be about how to help someone who's grieving. Those 6 things, those six points.
The reason she wants it to be 10 is because she's been watching too much of Monk. If you've ever watched the show Monk. And how obsessive compulsive he is, because sometimes we just need to watch a Monk because he's just funny and it's clean and it's like he's so obsessive, and so I think she doesn't want it to be an uneven number.
No, it's just 11 lies. Just doesn't sound like 10 lies. Sounds good. Or 12 lies.
I can certainly relate to that, Debbie.
Yes.
But I think for this discussion tonight, I keep looking at lie number 10. What good could possibly come from this? And again, your story, the fact that you are on here now for the 3rd episode, talk at 37 years in, talking to all of us who are so fresh on our journey. We would give nothing. We would give everything to have our sons back in an instant.
Yeah.
But this is the hand that we were dealt. And I shared in an episode a while ago of I was listening to Jason Williams, the Duke basketball player, NBA player, that he ruined his career riding a motorcycle, speeding down the highway and crashed it. And it was in his contract. He wasn't supposed to be on it. He was totally at fault. And he went through the woe is me that Debbie, you mentioned earlier. And he went through all of that. And then he changed his mindset to, okay, this is awful, but why not me? And that hit me so hard that, this is awful and I hate it and I would trade it in an instant.
Absolutely.
But it's the hand I was dealt. So, what good can we force out of it? And we're Chris and I are trying with this podcast and some other.
Doing a great job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we shared with our pastor, and then we referred in the last episode to seeing us on, we interviewed our pastor about grieving. And, we want God to restore what we lost. But what he does, how does he bring good out of bad, out of what's happened to us? He chooses to restore our lives for a greater and better good that, we can't see the whole puzzle. We can't see the whole masterpiece. He does that. So who would ever say that all these years later that we would be encouraging people who are grieving? And I mean, I have often told the Lord, couldn't you have chosen somebody else?
Yeah. Why us?
But then, like you said, why not us?
Yeah.
Why not us? So he chooses to restore when he doesn't restore. He just chooses to restore our lives.
Right. Well, wonderful. Debbie, is there anything else about your book that you want to share?
No. It's as Dennis said, there have been times I've been sharing a story and I would just stop and I have to cry and I just have to just let grief have its way. And one of the descriptions in the book that I talk about is like an ocean. Grief is like an ocean wave. And, those who are boogie boarders or surfers, they tend to go out further out in the ocean where it's a little bit more calmer. But every once in a while, that wave will catch them by surprise, and they try to fight themselves, try to fight the wave, and they just keep sinking and drinking in water and everything. That's the way grief is. But the experienced surfers just they just give in to the wave. They ride with it, and they just let the wave just crash over them until they're able to come back up again. So that's the way grief is. We just need to roll with the grief when it comes, and to encourage all of you that it will not always hurt this bad. And I think that's probably one of my main goals in the book, is to be able to help parents understand, or that anyone who's grieving, because a loss is a loss, but having a child die, as far as I'm concerned, that's the worst thing ever. Because the worst has happened, I can handle anything. So even hiking the mountain that we did today. So just allow grief to have its work, and that's the only way you're going to heal, is to allow yourself to grieve. As painful as it is, you will get better. It won't always hurt this bad.
And I think that goes back to something else you were talking about earlier about men, and people go directly to the mothers a lot of the time, and we as men we at least have a significant amount of the blame, because we do hide our emotions so much. And what you just said is beautiful. And to the men who are listening, to everybody on this show who's listening, but to the men who are listening, let grief have its way. It's okay. And it's easy to sit here and say that. I do the same thing. Pride kicks in, whatever. But I have, as you all said earlier, I've had some ugly cries. And it's cleansing and refreshing. And I wouldn't say it's healing, but it's cleansing and refreshing. And so men, do it. Let it be.
Good.
So, all right. Well, Chris, go ahead.
Nope. I was just gonna say I was gonna throw it right over to Dennis now, and so Dennis, Dan and I heard you talking at I'm not sure if it was your church or if it was a church you were visiting, but
it was our church. Yeah.
Okay, and it was just the way. I'm just gonna throw it right to you. There's no way I can even explain it.
Okay. All right.
You'll say it much more eloquently than I could, so I'm gonna throw it right to you.
Well, actually, what had happened was our pastor had been doing a real good series about when impossible things happen, and you
what you lose has been found.
Yeah, what you lose has been found. And somebody happened to text him and said, "Well, what do you do when what you have lost is not found?" And
not restored.
He got into thinking, and he said, "Okay, well," so he ended up speaking on when your loss is not restored. And so he asked Debbie and I, would we be interviewed to talk about grief, and particularly the grief of having a child die. And I thought it was very wise of him, because for many people here particularly people listening to this presentation, you were listening because you had something very significant to you lost, and it was not restored. And so part of life is recognizing there are times when, like Debbie alluded to, things are not restored, but we can be restored. In other words, we can have another story. We all have a story different than what we thought we were going to have. We thought we'd have 2 sons grow up and get married. You thought you'd have your son grow up. Both of you thought you'd have your sons grow up. They'd get married. They'd have grandchildren. All those kind of things, which we know is not going to happen. So when those kind of things happen, you look to see the new story, and there is a new story. But what the pastor asked us was, Dennis, what would you suggest to people that are working with people, living with people, loving people that are grieving? And the first one was this: the ministry of presence. Show up and shut up. So many times people want to be comforting, and so they'll say a lot of things, and unfortunately sometimes the things they say can be stupid.
Like God needed another rose in his garden.
Yeah, God needed another rose in his rose garden.
He needed an angel.
Oh, he needed an angel. Your son's an angel. Bull crap. That's not true. God didn't take my son to be an angel, or he didn't need a rosebud. So people don't know what to say, so they say things that are not very smart. And so sometimes what we need for people to do is just come around us, hug us, keep your mouth shut, just Hug people that are grieving and don't say anything. Don't say it's going to be okay. Don't, I mean, some people have been crazy enough to say, particularly the younger parents, well, at least you can have other children.
Yeah,
I don't care how
us.
many other children I have, they would never, ever replace Ryan. It's not possible. So really the first point is just show up. Show up and shut up, okay? And then some people will don't say, let me know if you need anything. No, I don't know what I need right now. My son's just died. I'm in the throes of, I don't know what's going on. So don't say if you need anything. Of course I need some things. I need things like, why don't you bring some food? If there's small children or other children that need help, assist with those children. Assist with, if the grass needs cutting,
Practical things.
Yeah, practical things. In other words, but don't be just guilty of saying if you need anything. We don't know what we need right now. What we really need, we just need to live through the next minute. We're just hoping to live through the next minute. So when you say, let me know if you need anything, no, we need lots of things. We just need you to be willing to do some of those things. The next one is, don't be afraid to mention the loved one's name and ask if there's anything you would like to share about that loved one. I love it even this many years later, if somebody will ask about Ryan or what kind of kid was he or all of those kind of things, I love it. So don't be afraid of mentioning the loved one's name. It's not like we've forgotten who the loved one is, all right? I mean, we're never going to forget our kid's name. We're never going to forget what they were like. So don't be afraid to bring up the loved one's name. And in fact, many of us love it when you bring up our child's name. So that's another one. And then be a true 2:00 in the morning friend. Don't say I'm here whenever you need me, whatever time you need me, whatever, and not do that. If there's, most of us have 2 or 3 people that we would consider 2:00 in the morning friends, that if I would call them at 2:00 in the morning and need to talk to them or need them to come over, they would genuinely do that. So we need some 2:00 in the morning friends. But don't say you're going to be a 2:00 in the morning friend if you're going to let the phone ring and not answer it. Be a true 2:00 in the morning friend. And then, when somebody dies, you are overwhelmed with people. They're here. They're for the first week or two. It's like they're coming through the door. They're bringing food. They're doing all that. We need people who will be there when everybody else has gone home. Mm-hmm. When you go back home and you get back to that base and you buried your son in North Carolina or in another state, and you go back and you go to a home where there were 2 sons, now there's only 1 son, and this 1 son and a husband and a wife, and nobody's there. We need somebody to be there when you come home to that empty house. You come home to that empty bedroom. You come home to the what will never be again. So in other words, be there when everyone else goes home, and just be there. Again, you don't need to be doing a lot of things, saying a lot of words, just be there. And then something that I try to do as much as possible is remember their birth dates and their death dates, okay? The fact that you don't mention Ryan's name, that he died on December the 10th, many, many years ago, to me, it says, well, do you realize this kid existed? Do you realize that he was born? Do you realize that he died? So do you think I'm going to forget that? So please mention his name. Talk about what kind of kid he was. In other words, people think they think sometimes, well, if I mention the name, it's going to cause them pain. Oh, no. It may cause some pain, but it also causes some joy that you happen to remember that we had a little boy who lived to be 6 years of age, who was mischievous, full of life, loved life, and we're never going to forget him. And so we don't want you to forget him. So, and sometimes, unfortunately, some people that can be the very worst at this are family members. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They feel like, well, if I mention his name, Dennis or Debbie's going to get real sad, or they're going to get upset. No, in some ways, I get angry or I get really hurt that you forgot you had a cousin named Ryan, or you had a nephew named Ryan, or you had someone that's close in your, or a friend, and somehow you just forget. Nope, we're not going to forget. So bring up the death date. And I mean, you don't bring it up. I mean, like I usually try to text them or call them and say, I'm thinking of you today. Because guess what? Every birth date and every death date, I believe, of our children, we're never going to forget it as long as we have a memory.
Yeah.
And no matter whether it's been 1 year, 10 years, 37 years, I'm going to always remember that on June 28th, a little boy named Ryan was born. And I'm going to always remember that on December the 10th, 1985, a little boy named Ryan died. So I'm not going to forget it. So I would encourage people, don't forget it. It means a lot to us. So they were some of the suggestions that I shared with my pastor in that service. And I do think they're very practical suggestions. And the big thing about it is it doesn't take money and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. It just says, I care. I'm sorry. And again, you don't say a lot of words. I care. I'm sorry. And so I hope they're helpful for people. And hopefully those that are going through the bereavement process, they can use some of these suggestions to maybe work with friends and family members and say, this is what I need from you. And if that's what they need, it helps a lot in the process of processing that grief. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, those are great practical advice. Yeah, I thought about every single one of those, and I think the one right now that Amanda and I think struggle with the most is you think about those first 2 weeks and how many people were there to help you, and how we're right at our 2-year mark now, and you almost feel like people just completely forgotten and don't realize literally the pain and struggle every day we still go through.
Yep.
And you kind of feel like you're on an island alone again with all the pain. So yeah, those are all amazing advice.
Yeah. Which unfortunately adds to that pain. It takes pain that's very deep and it makes that pain even deeper, because what do you mean you forgot your nephew? I mean, it's definitely, and I think part of it is too, people want to go on with life. They want to live their life. They don't want to get caught in that bind of, oh my goodness, they had a child die. So they get caught in, we got to move on from this. Well, people, bereaved parents are never going to move on from it. We're going to live it, and we're going to love again, and we're going to laugh again, but we'll never move on from the reality that we had a child die.
And I was thinking just as today that I remember in the early stages, feeling like I was on a merry-go-round in a carousel in an amusement park, and that I had been thrown off, and everybody I knew was still on that merry-go-round. And it just seemed to me that I just remember the early throes of grief were like everything was in slow motion. But it was as if the world had stopped. But yet everybody else was just still going on with their lives. And I was just like, can't you just stop and grieve with us for a while? So I don't know if I'm the only one who thought that way, but I just remember how it just felt in the beginning, that it just seemed unreal that people would keep going and living their busy lives while I was over there in the corner, thrown off of the merry-go-round, and it's like, hey, I'm all alone here. Come help me. So
and I think an added stressor or pressure for grief is sometimes that we do have to educate people, because they don't know what to do. I mean, they don't know how to stop with you and walk with you. And so I think a part of it is an education process. And also, that's a great opportunity to practice forgiveness, because sometimes you really like to tell people, I'd like to tell you what I think about how you're working in this process with us right now. But instead, you say, okay, I'm going to choose to forgive. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to talk about, because I think everything you said is absolutely spot on, perfect. The education process, I think, is huge. I just went through that with Jameson's birthday last September, Erica and I did not hear from many people, and we went through all the feelings that you all just shared, and it hurt. It hurt really badly. And I talked to maybe 5 or 10 of the people closest to me and shared how much it hurt. And they were so apologetic, and they were hurt themselves. But every one of them has done better since then at acknowledging his birthday and things like that. So the point I want to make is that if you're somebody that's close to one of us who's grieving, don't take offense when we educate you. It's not coming from a bad place of anger. It's coming from a deep place of hurt. And our attempts to educate you are cries for help from people who we love dearly.
Yep.
Because
Good point.
I don't try to educate 99% of the people I see every day. But those 5 to 10 people who are in my close circle, I want to educate you because I love you and I care about you. And you're the people I want close to me because I know that you will get it as well as anybody possibly could.
Good. That's excellent. Yep.
100%.
Good.
Amazing.
Number 7.
Yes.
Number 7. Wait, I'm counting. Yeah.
So, Debbie and Dennis, I think we're getting kind of close to the end. And is there any last minute advice you'd love to throw out there for anyone listening today that we haven't talked about yet?
I think I'd like to say, and it can be very difficult, but as much as possible, don't allow anger to get the upper hand in your life, because anger becomes very destructive, both to you personally and to other people. Other people run from you many times when you're angry. They don't know what to do. So I think for me, there were times that I was so angry that our son died, and so I think you just, fortunately, I don't have that now at this point in time. But if you find yourself angry, what's underneath that anger? Because most of the time when we find ourselves angry,
That's a fruit.
it's not really anger. It's something
Deeper.
other than anger. And
Deeper.
many times for those of us that are bereaved, it's just, I'm so sad. I'm just so destroyed that my child died. And so go with what's going on there with the sadness versus, well, I'm mad at the world because my son died, or I'm angry about this and the driver and all of that. If you can get to what really is there, many times sometimes you just need to have a real good cry. You just need to have a real good cry, and it can be extremely helpful. So I think that's my last bit of advice is don't let anger destroy you, because unfortunately anger can destroy you. It can destroy relationships, and our children would never want us to allow those kind of things to happen. So that would be my last advice.
Okay.
You done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Debbie, anything you want to throw out there?
I think I'm done unless you have a question. So.
No, I don't think so. Dan?
No, I think Debbie and Dennis, thank you so much. When I heard you speak, again, I saw Dennis, your post, and I listened to that sermon where you two were called up on stage, and I wrote to Chris immediately and was like, dude, you need to listen to this. And then the wisdom that you two have, and the hope that you give those of us who are much newer on our journey. I cannot thank you enough, just personally, what you do for me. It means the world. You two are amazing, special people, and thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom and your tips and everything with everybody who's willing to listen. It means the world. I know I'll speak for Chris here. It means the world to us that you would come back again and again, and just keep talking with us, and to everybody who's listening, thank you.
Mhm.
Glad to do it anytime.
Mhm.
So,
Good.
okay.
So with that, everyone, thank you so much for listening. I think these last two episodes with Debbie and Dennis Jordan have been just amazing. We hope that you learned some valuable tips from it. And what a great way Chris and I are going to wrap up season 2 of our podcast next week, just kind of reviewing everything. But what a perfect way to end, to have Debbie and Dennis on here. So thank you all for listening to A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache.